But let me do a formal introduction and we'll have Grant get started and I'll be admitting people as Grant is speaking. He's got a great PowerPoint presentation. I first met Grant, believe it or not, he was teaching my GRI class. That was back in about 2006, I think, when I took my GRI is when we first met. And I don't know if you remember that. And then I went to Aura. He's a certified instructor for NAR, FAR, Aura. He teaches all over the United States. He is the utmost expert when it comes to finance and mortgages. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my friend and mortgage banker extraordinaire, Grant Simon.
Well, I'm humbled. Thank you very much, Rich. As you know, I love you, and I love your family, and I love your ethics, and I love everything you do. So y'all are blessed to be working with an extraordinary leader, and to see him grow and flourish has been incredible. But I'm extremely excited to chat with you this morning. I want to get right down to business. What we're going to be talking about in this virtual seminar is I want to talk about interest rates, and I want to talk a little bit about interest rate volatility. I want you to know a little bit about loan level adjustments, overlays, and then Rich and I want to touch a little bit towards the end on forbearance and deferral and let you know about what's going on there. But I don't want you to lose sight of what your mission statement is before and after, is that number one, you guys are critically important to the economy. In Florida, you represent 25% of the gross state product, but you strengthen the housing market every day with what you do. You bolster the economy and you protect consumers. So I want to thank you for what you do for us and for everybody, critically important. So here's the good news, and I wanted to start off with the good news, is that consumers still want to buy. There's new safety protocols in place, but right now there's extraordinarily high conversion rates. So in other words, you're able to take these buyers, show them 2 or 3 houses, convert them into a buyer or into under contract. Rates are great and you are essential. And here's my slogan, Rich, and you're going to like this. If you can pick your spouse, you can pick your house online. No ifs, ands, or buts. And you can steal that from me, Rich, if you want.
I love that.
It's all good. So now more than ever, you know, Rich is always positive and so am I, but you've got to be positive. You've got to be nice. You got to stay vigilant and you got to stay focused more than ever now before. Some people may be having a bad day. It isn't going to happen to us though. We're going to be positive. We're going to be happy and it's going to go forward. So now this is what everybody likes from me, Rich, is they want to get tested.
Sure.
What they really know. So the first one isn't PIA, it's PIW. So the question is, do you know what a PIW, what an RON, an MBS, an EPD, an SRP, a PTAP, and a QE is? You know, those are the tests. I won't dwell a lot on the tests. I'll dwell on the answers. Is that you've got to understand, we lenders were getting a lot of property inspection waivers. So we might get a 20% down deal. We don't even need to do an appraisal on the transaction, which is really quite amazing. We're using remote online notaries, so people aren't even having to leave the comforts of their own home. If you're going to use remote online notaries, what the real requirement is, there's 2 documents lenders need wet signed. One of them's a Social Security Social Security confirmation number, and the other is the note. They're gonna print it, sign it, mail it in. Mortgage-backed securities, it's a big deal these days, but early payment default is crazy. People are closing on loans. They don't have to make a payment for 2 months, and then they're going into forbearance. Well, they haven't paid their first payment, so it's called an early payment default, hurting a lot of lenders because they got to keep that loan forever on their portfolio. Service release premiums, lenders used to be selling their loans to servicers and would get a service release premium. Nobody wants to buy them these days. They're worth a lot. They're worth less than they ever were before. There's a lot of pass-through assistance program, and the big thing we'll talk about in a little while is this quantitative easing. So hope you did well on the test. But as Rich and I both know, real estate's on sale now, and there's a lot of good inventory out there. So it's hard to buy a house if you're not looking, and it's hard to buy a house if you're not in the market. So don't think that now isn't the time to be in the market. It absolutely is. On to rates. This week's theme is cautiously floating, but rates are extraordinary. Before I got on this call, I priced a VA loan. VA loan with good credit today, I priced it below 3%. That's 2 7/8. Last Sunday, I locked in a veteran at 2 3/4%. The veteran and I couldn't believe the rate was really real. At 8:30 Monday morning, I confirmed it with him and I said, you're in at 2 3/4. Locking conventional buyers in at 3 1/8. These rates are just so extraordinary. And yes, we are closing loans. We haven't missed a closing date. There's no extensions, but obviously you have to be employed. Traditional methods for 50 years looking at interest rate was looking at this 10-year treasury note and the prices of these mortgage-backed securities, and it just doesn't work anymore. Here's what happened. Here's the chart. For 50 years, that's how mortgage rates followed the 10-year treasury note. It was plus a risk spread of about 1.7 to 2%. You got to throw that formula out the window now because it's just not working. Right now, rate sheet prices that loan officers get are disconnected from mortgage-backed security prices, disconnected from treasury prices. It's all being set by the lenders, but as I was sharing with Rich right now, the banks and the small banks, they're flaunting it right now because they've got it. But here's what you really need to know about. Rates vary between lenders. And different lenders have different prices, but you have to be a little more astute today than ever before, because if you're getting some higher prices or higher costs, it may be the time to get a second opinion and just double check it. Do it politically correct, but double check it. But sometimes lenders are getting intraday pricing changes. We've been in such a constant market, we haven't seen those intraday changes like we're seeing right now. But some days are more volatile than others. This third one, overlays, is the biggest deal going on right now. As you probably know, lenders used to do FHA and VA loans down to 580 credit scores. Lenders have raised them about 60 points, and now they're at about 640 minimum credit scores. 2 days ago, I was at 620. Today, I'm at 640. A lot of lenders out there at 660, 680. Some are going to get up into the 700, so it's crazy. So if you have a buyer, FHA or VA buyer, is in that range, you may need a lender who's good at raising their score or getting them in that entry level at 640. Be careful about overlays and loan level price adjustments. We were so spoiled for about a decade because we were able to deliver 0-point loans. Right now, it's very hard to come in at 0 at a par price. So for example, the loan that I priced right before this seminar started, I took a conventional buyer, 5% down, and I said, he has a 760 score, what's my price? At 3 1/4, I would pay about $2,000 of his closing costs at 3 1/4. At 3 1/8, he would have to pay about $1,000 or $1,500 to get that rate. There was nothing at no points. So be prepared to have the conversation that there's a lot of loan level price adjustments based upon loan to values, based upon credit scores. And there's no like 0-point loans. Consumers aren't aware that it's hard to pin the tail on the donkey and get a 0 price loan. Either you'll get a closing cost credit from the lender or they'll pay some points, but don't be spoiled like we were before. And just so you know, we'll come back and answer questions. But here are the variables going on right now. You've got stock market prices, mortgage-backed securities, a 10-year treasury note, and this thing Rich and I hadn't even talked about since 2008 was this QE, quantitative easing. But right now, the Federal Reserve has come in with their guns blazing. They're spending $30 billion a day to stabilize the housing and mortgage market. So that's pretty strong. Rich, this is going to surprise you. Look at this. Back when Rich had a little bit darker hair in late 2008, all the way through 6 of 2010, the Fed spent 1.25 trillion keeping rates stable and keeping the market open. QE2 came in November of 2010 to June of 11 and spent 600 billion. QE3 was from November of 2012 till December of 2012. They spent 85 billion per month. Now look at what they're spending, 30 billion per day to keep you guys in business. So you got to put our hats off to the Fed for coming in and saying, hey, they're keeping this market alive and well. So in a nutshell, what does QE mean, quantitative easing? It increases liquidity in the flow of money to the capital markets. And quite frankly, if they didn't do that, we'd all be out of business. But the good news is you're so essential, you're 25% of the gross state product, and you're probably 20% of the national product. So what you do, the Fed recognizes that. So here's what we're seeing in the wild swings. Because everybody about a month ago, maybe 40 days ago, when rates dropped, everybody came in and said, hey, I want to refinance. Well, what it did is it flooded all lenders and we couldn't handle the business. There was so much demand that we couldn't handle the supply. You know what lenders did when they got inundated with all those loans? Raised their rates so it would turn the faucet off. So once again, why the wild swings in interest rates? The industry couldn't handle the volume, supply and demand, and the servicing runoff was killing lenders. What that means is if a lender had a big servicing portfolio and half of it went away, they probably paid more than it was worth and they got crushed financially, so they had to raise their rates. Right now, we're getting into a much more stable market, and that's good, and I'll show you why. So I want to make sure you're clear on what these loan level price adjustments are. They're basically points or costs for risk, credit score, loan to value, and product and program. These loan level price adjustments, you've just got to be prepared for them and understand what they are, but they're basically points for risk. Or quite frankly, if there isn't the risk, then maybe they'll get a lender credit. So let's talk about the primary mortgage market survey. That comes out every Thursday by Freddie Mac. The headline this week that came out on Thursday was that rates remain flat. Well, it gives consumers a false sense of reality. It doesn't differentiate for conventional FHA or VA, and it doesn't apply credit scores. So here's what a consumer could see from what they'll publish. They'll see this primary mortgage market survey. They'll see the rate at 3.33 with about 3/4 of a point. That's almost fairly accurate, maybe on a 700, 680 credit score. But once again, if they have a good credit score, maybe this drops down to 3 1/4. But you can go to freddiemac.com and check this primary mortgage market survey. Rich, I shared that with you back in 2008, and it's still valid. You guys need to be going there. It's great. You can share this information with the consumer every day. Here's what the chief economist from Freddie Mac said, which is inspiring for me and you, and keep this between us. He says this: there's room for rates to move down. That's good news, but don't tell your client, hey, don't do anything because rates are going to move down. Just keep that in your back pocket. This year, the 10-year Treasury market has declined over a full percentage point, yet rates have only declined by 1/3 of a point. As financial markets continue to heal, and I love the word heal because that's what we're doing from Corona. We're healing. We expect mortgage rates will drift lower in the second half of 2020, which is going to make you all rich. The issue is, though, if you're on the sidelines and you're not playing and you're not out there working, second half of 2020 won't bring you those rewards. But if you just stay the course, keep reading, keep lead generating, keep prospecting, I am telling you, you are going to have the most incredible second half of 2020. You're not going to even know what to do. I can't wait for Rich's comments on that a little bit later. So here's the reality. check with your lender on where they are rate-wise and product-wise. A lot of lenders are backing off, but just remember, as a lot are backing off, a lot are getting in, and those are the banks. Be aware of your loan to values. Keep an eye on your overlays, and your credit profile is more important now than ever before. Stay away from the 30-day closing dates. Probably go 45 to 60 is way safer. I could still do one in 20 or 30 days, but you don't want to jam the system. I'm just trying to tell you, unless you have a property inspection waiver and your home inspection gets done. And then once again, be cautious about your client's job security, because if they're furloughed or laid off, the lender is going to do a verification of employment, you know, within that last week before closing. If they're furloughed or laid off, you're going to have a little bit of an issue on that closing date. So that's the reality of what's going on. And now I get to finally hit you with this forbearance deferral issue. And it's all about the CARES Act. CARES is a cute acronym for Corona Aid and Economic Security. It began March 18th. It's on federally backed loans. What does that mean? Conventional loans with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, and USDA loans covers the CARES Act. If you go into forbearance, it's going 90 days at a time. That you've got to be very careful. Do not recommend or not recommend that a consumer do that. Recommend that they talk to their servicer and their servicer alone, because you don't want to put a client in a position where he's got to pay it all back in 90 days, or if they renew it and then he gets deeper in a hole for 180 days. If at all possible, I recommend making those payments, just sucking it up, make the payments. I know it hurts, but it's the opposite of amortization. You don't want to go negative. So stay away from being negative unless you absolutely have to check with your servicer, but it doesn't deal with escrows. In other words, who's going to pay the taxes and insurance when it becomes due? And the answer is the servicer has to. So tell me what it's going to look like this November. Right now there's over 750,000 people in forbearance. That number could probably quadruple. And so what's going to happen in November? Nobody making a payment. The servicer's got to pay those taxes in November. It's going to cause a little chaos in the industry. So just be aware of that. Also, forbearance doesn't deal with HOA or condo dues. Ask Rich about 2010, how these homeowners associations, they were litigious. They were wanting to sue everybody, and they could put you into foreclosure. So make sure your clients are paying their HOA and condo dues. Be careful and avoid if you can. That's a big, 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 big deal. So I want to make sure that you all have my contact information. I'll leave this up on the screen, and I'm going to bring Rich in and have him give you a few comments, because one thing I will tell you about Rich and I, we lived through 2008, we survived 2008, and we observed that some people flourished through that time period. Rich, would that be an accurate depiction?
That is so accurate. The people that did the right things, had the right mindset, blocked out the news and the negativity, and just did what they were supposed to do, are all sitting really pretty 10 years later. The other people, unfortunately, either didn't make it, left the industry. Grant, as you know, probably 40 to 50% of all licensed agents in the country back in 2008 to 2011 left the industry. Because they got caught up in the momentum, the news, the sensationalism. So I love where you're going. I just want to point one thing out. I love that you explained. So forbearance is when you ask the bank, can we put my payments on hold, and we'll tack it on to the back end of the loan. We'll extend the loan. And you brought up a great point. It doesn't cover escrow. So what happens now? So the bank pays the escrow, they pay the taxes to protect their asset, right? Because there's a mortgage, a note. They're going to protect the asset so it doesn't get sold in a note, on a auction rather. And now what happens? They reassess your escrow the next year, and what will happen to that person's payment?
Oh,
tell them, Grant.
Rich, that is such a good point. Is that you're exactly right. Their payment's going to swell. and it's just gonna be ugly. There's just, I don't know, I don't have a word for it. What do you?
It's going to go up a couple $100 a month, and that's on a locked rate. It's not even an adjustable. On a locked rate, the mortgage payment's going to skyrocket because the bank will lay out the money for the escrow, for the taxes. Here's what nobody's thinking. When they do an escrow analysis, come the first of the year, guess what? Mortgage payments are going to balloon, and now this takes a whole long period to get it back down.
Well, also, some servicers could say, look, not only are we going to raise your payment, but we also want all that money back now. And the consumer is going to say, so what's my option? And the bank may come back and say, tell you what, we'll offer you a modification. The challenge with modifications is, hey, they may work a deal, but it impacts the consumer on future deals that they could obtain because there's going to be a wait period for all consumers who took this modification. So I'd try to say it like this. There's a lot of things that could happen and not a lot of them are good. Rich, would you say that?
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that there's a lot of people in Facebook that are saying, oh, defer the loans, defer the payments. My advice is, and as agents, please do not advise because we're not attorneys and we're not mortgage bankers and brokers. You need to be the resource, not the source. You got to refer them to experts like Grant or whoever provided their loan for them to give advice, because I promise you, the aftermath 6 months to a year down the road of the ramifications of all these forbearances, we won't know until much later down the road, right? So don't be jumping on the bandwagon about, oh, you can get a forbearance. Well, the good news is, yeah, they delay your payments for 90 days and tack it on the back of the loan. The bad news is you don't have any idea what's to come with escrow analysis. So I absolutely love that. So one of the other things, I was taking some notes. This was absolutely a great presentation, Grant. So you mentioned in the beginning that the banks are tightening their belts. They're raising the credit scores. And basically, this has to do with supply and demand. You nailed it on that. There's so many people in the refi market. There's so many people that are finding this attraction. And what I usually explain to agents is for 1% in interest rate, up or down, is about the equivalent of 10% of purchase power on price. So in other words, we saw interest rates go up very fast for about half to a whole point within the last 30 days, and they came back down. That going up 1 point lessened their buying power. Now that it's back down, they've gained that buying power, guys. So 1% in interest rate, and correct me if I'm wrong, Grant, is roughly 10% purchase power, either up or down, either way.
It absolutely is. But once again, I was working with a client and he said, should I wait to lock in my rate? And I said, it would be a very bad decision. Maybe you could get a 0.25% downward, but the risk of it going up is much greater than the risk of it going down. So if you have a consumer who's saying, you know what, I think I'm going to wait on this lock, you could be risking your transaction. A, maybe they get laid off from their job. B, maybe the market freaks out a little bit and this demand is too great and they raise prices like we did a few weeks ago. And we raised it. I went all the way from 3 to 5% and then back down again to that low level 3. So keep your eye on that ball. But I would tell you what's in front of you is probably very good, but having somebody defer thinking they can prognosticate this market would be a tragic mistake. Yeah. Rich, you've seen that happen.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned something that gave me a thought, Grant. If you remember back in the day in 2007, 8, 9, when real estate, the economy was challenged at that time. And you said the rates fluctuated. You've seen it go from 3 to 5 and back down to 3, all in 30 days. There's been some really big fluctuations. However, if we think back in 2008, interest rates were between 6 and 7%, right? So 100%. Even at 5%, that is a great deal at 5%.
It is. And the other thing I really want you to know is that if you look at other assets like the Dow, like NASDAQ, like the S&P 500, like gold and like silver, do you know what the belle of the ball is still? It's real estate. So don't ever forget that what you've got is such a great asset, and what you're selling is such a great asset. I mean, you've seen how the Dow and the S&P 500 have just plummeted. But what about real estate? Has real estate plummeted? The answer is absolutely not. And that's the beauty of real estate.
Yeah. The volatility in the stock market is scary, especially when you get to be my age and Grant's age at 29 years old. We don't want to take risk anymore. Risk is not our friend anymore. So we like
No.
the stability. Real estate is as stable so long as you're looking at long term. Real estate is the safest thing you can invest your money in. Safest thing you can do.
And and that's, we'll probably do this again sometime, Rich, because I've had a good time, and I want to share, I'm going to want to share with you that home price appreciation piece so you can see where it is. But with the listing inventory as low as it is,
Right.
it actually secures the values of properties because we're still in multiple offer situations. People are still buying, people are still looking. And so, now is the greatest time in the world to get them into the marketplace and buying, because they've seen their other assets going out the window and they see what's happening to their assets. So I think what Rich said is sage advice. Turn off the TV. Instead of the TV, read. I mean,
That's right.
you can't see behind me, but I am a voracious reader. And I will tell you, there is nothing more inspiring than to read as opposed to watching the news. Rich, how do you say to that?
I would absolutely agree, and I don't care if I'm not a big reader. I fall asleep. So audible.com, Grant. Oh my God. When just put the earplugs in and I'm good. I'm set to go.
You know,
So whether you want to read it or
the
go
thing
to
is, I've got
audible.com.
Audible, I've got my books, but whatever you do, don't get caught up in all the negativity that's going out
Right.
there. I need you being with the people who are positive and enthusiastic, because it really is exciting, and that's having your finger on the pulse, understanding the marketplace, knowing what's going on. But I will tell you this: follow the Aura statistics, because statistically, if there were 500 transactions last week, the only thing I've got to ask you is how many of them were yours, because they're there and people are buying. And when we get on the other side of this thing, the pent up demand is going to be extraordinary.
The funny thing, Grant, that you just mentioned is so true. I don't care how bad, even if it was the Great Depression 90 years ago, it doesn't matter what happens. When you look in MLS, the next day, there always is listings taken, houses are closing, and houses went pending. Every single day, no matter what's going on in the world, people will always be buying and selling real estate.
100%. I mean, and quite frankly, we may get back into some of the short sales and foreclosures a year down the road, but that's something to be focused on a year down the road. Right now, what I want you to focus on is listings and sales. Are those the two bread and butters of this whole thing?
That's the foundational pieces, Grant.
And the thing that and Rich knows this, the thing that I truly love about Keller Williams is their focus on lead generating and prospecting. If you could hear the stories that I've heard from Rich, standing in front of the Walmarts of the world and lead generating with his business cards scattered on the ground. Rich, you probably don't think I remember that, but I will tell you this: we have a little bit better ways of doing that now. But if you're not touching you're laughing, but it's true.
It is true.
If you're not touching your database, and if you're not reaching out and checking in on folks, but don't do it at a superfluous level. I think you've really got to reach out to your database on a sincere level and check in. But these broad-based generics, hey, not addressing them by name and sending them a text, and it's some group text, doesn't mean anything to me. But if you reach out to them by name and say, hey, out of sincerity, I just wanted to touch base and see how you're doing, see if there's anything I can do, keep you abreast of what's going on, I think it means a lot more. How do you feel about those cold texts, Rich?
So I think that they do work, but in a time like now, my advice is to be genuine and real, Grant. I think you've got to check in with people and come from contribution. You got to find out. So how are you doing? How's your family? Is there anything I can get you? There are a lot of senior citizens who are either unable to leave their house or afraid to leave their house. And you don't know if that person's a senior citizen or not on the phone most of the time. We need to be asking what we can do to the community, how we can serve other people. That's what servant leadership is, right? We need to give, we need to offer as opposed to receive. So this isn't the time to ask for referrals. This is the time to
on a Zoom, you can touch them. Yeah, be real, be genuine, be sincere, and certainly help. That's what we do, is we help people. That's the beauty of this. But we are going to get on the other end of this whole thing, and
yes, we will.
You're poised and positioned. You're at the right place at the right time. You know how Rich and I look at this? Extraordinary opportunity. Extraordinary opportunity, because you have, of the 16,000 members in this association, you've got so many disenfranchised that won't participate in these Zooms, won't listen to education in the market. They won't read, they won't reach out, they won't lead generate, they won't prospect. The decisions you make today impact 90 and 120 days from today. Is that accurate, Rich?
That is dead on, Grant. And here's what I always tell people. Today's challenges become tomorrow's opportunities once we have a plan and take action on it. Right? So you just got to think of it that way. So at any time you have a challenge in life, that today's challenge is tomorrow's opportunity once you have a plan and take action on that plan.
Rich, can we take a few questions from?
Yeah, I'd love that. Guys, let's open it up. Grant is here to answer any questions you have on interest rates, banking, mortgages, anything like that. So let's open it up, guys.
I've got a quick question.
Go, Laura.
So how can we use this information you've given us today to reach sellers who they're saying, well, I'm afraid the market's going to go down. We think maybe we should wait. What's the best way, do you think, to approach that with them and get them to change their mindset?
It's a great question. First of all, it's a great question. Is that how do you tell us? How does a seller know? Well, first of all, if they're a seller in the market, the fear of the reason why it would be better to sell now if they think the market is going down is that the price is good now. And so where they are is better than where they think it will be. But the interesting thing, I mean, I could just maybe, if you email me, I could get you some articles from Zelman and Associates or other people across the country who track home price appreciation. Everything that I'm reading, although, Orlando was the third best metropolitan area in the country in the fourth quarter of 2019. And what we were seeing is in that 6, 7, 8% range. I think now what's realistic in home price appreciation is more normal market of 2 to 3% appreciation. But appreciation is so much better than depreciation. So I would just say to them, look, what you have in front of you is an extraordinary opportunity to take advantage of your current value. Let's not wait for it to go down or go up, but let's take advantage of where we are today. Rich, I know you've got an answer to that as well.
Yeah, I love that sometimes, Grant, you break it down to the basics, and sometimes we have to go back to the foundations. A simple statement like appreciation is better than depreciation every day of the week, unless you're doing a tax return, then we'll take the depreciation too, right? So, I mean, sometimes it's that simple, guys. We don't have to think it. It doesn't matter if houses are going up 2% or 6%. Truthfully, even with all the rentals that I have, I'd rather see stabilized appreciation of 2 or 3% than 10 or 12. When you're at 10 or 12, that's a volatile market. I don't know what's going to happen of years of that. We've had that in our area for 5 or 6 years. I'd like to see just 2, 3, no more than 4%. That's stable. That'll give us a long, prosperous, generous house market for years to come. I really don't want to see that 10. I remember there was years it went up like 12, 14% after 2012, and that's just not healthy, guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I just think evaluate where they are right now, and I think they'll be happy with the appreciation they've received. That's my best question there. Anybody else?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Have you seen any of the appraisals starting to come back low? Any issues with the appraisals?
Question. The answer to your question is we're getting a lot of property inspection waivers, but the answer to your question is I have not seen any. I was going to expect lower appraisals when appraisers aren't able to go inside the property and they're doing these drive-by appraisals. But so far, my experience has been very positive in that we're not seeing, I would have seen it by now if it was an issue. And I can only, state by that seeing the loans that we're seeing. Now, I will tell you, if I went back a month or two, I had seen some wild fluctuations where some appraisers were coming in 20,000 low if it was disputable, or you went and ordered another appraisal and then it came in value. But right now things seem to be pretty level in that regard. So I'm not seeing it, but what I am most impressed about is that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are looking at these properties in their database, and they're doing property inspection waivers and saying, do we really even need an appraisal on this property? That's what's crazy, but you're not seeing that, and you won't see it on FHA or VA loans. You'll see it on conventional loans, and I love property inspection waivers, but specific to answer your question, I haven't seen it yet.
So under what circumstances, Grant, would a bank give you a waiver, property inspection waiver?
If the database of, first of all, we've got to determine whether we're going to put that conventional loan into Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. I would tell you that if the borrower has a high credit score and he's putting 20% down, I think there's a very good shot at it. But once again, that's coming from from lenders who are selling direct to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But I love property inspection waivers. We just got a 20% down transaction, and I haven't even told the borrower the good news that, look, I don't even need an appraisal. Fannie and Freddie, they have a database. They've seen all these houses before. If you really think about it, it was an over embellishment on their part to want to go in and take pictures. But I don't think it's as big a necessity as they've made it out to be, because the database is that big.
Great point. Great point. Guys, we got enough time for one more question.
Can I take it, Rich?
Yeah, please do, Ruth.
Hey, Grant. Thanks for coming on and educating us. I really appreciate it. My question has to do with, you talked about mortgage rates going down in the second half of 2020. And so I'm concerned with what's the best way to stay on top of that as that happens, so that we can help our past customers if they do need to refinance or want to refinance?
Well, number one, Rich, you're going to like this. I would recommend that as I teach at Aura, that you come to some of those classes, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. Number two, I would like you to start on your calendar, because in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, he says, how do you make something happen? And the way you make something happen is by writing it down and scheduling it. So what I'd like you to do every Thursday at about 12 o'clock is go to the website freddiemac.com and have a piece of paper on the side of your desk and start tracking the 30-year fixed rate at freddiemac.com. But I also want you to, on a daily basis, start tracking the 10-year Treasury note. Although there's been a disconnect from that, and now all you got to do in Google is type in 10-year Treasury note, go to the Market Watch website there. but you'll come up with the 10-year treasury note. Actually, if you give me about 10 seconds, I'll actually do it for you right now, and you could pull out your phones. I've never done this virtually before, but if you pull out your phone and you go to Google and you type in the number 10 and then 10-year treasury note, and you go to the MarketWatch website, right now the 10-year treasury note is trading at 0.729. I want you to start tracking that on a daily basis and watch the 10-year treasury note. As that goes down, rates are going to come down. As that goes up, rates are going to come up. But remember, there's a little disconnect right now between it all, but it's going to come back to that. So if you're tracking if I were only tracking two things in the universe, I'd be tracking the primary mortgage market surveys on Thursday. I'd be tracking the 10-year treasury note 5 days a week because it's positive. It's not a negative thing to fool your brain with, but you're going to see as that 10-year goes up and down, interest rates typically follow when it gets back to a more normal market. Rich, is that valid?
That is extremely valid. I love that little tidbit there.
Yes.
So,
anything I can do, but I want to thank you guys.
Tell everybody, because we've got people from our Claremont office, our Citrus office, and our Spring Hill office on, and Mount Dora. So get a hold of you one more time.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
How do they get a hold of you one more time if they need your
Okay.
services?
You can, my website is my name. It's grantsimon.com. So if you just go to www.grantsimon.com, you can find me. An easier email is grant@grantsimon.com. Rich, it's been there.
Why complicate things?
Why make it more complicated than it has to? But I will say this in all sincerity. If there's anything I could do to help you guys, I don't have to be involved in the deal, but Rich knows this. I would do anything in the world to help you that I could. But if you got it, flaunt it. And I will tell you right now, I've got the perfect package. I got the rates, the processing, the underwriting, the closing, and the servicing. So I'll leave you at that. Thank you all very much, Rich. All my blessings to you and your family.
You too, Grant. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.